That's
Right.
our goal, is to get people really talking about this every day. You don't have to have a mental health struggle. You don't have to be part of a mental health organization. You don't have to have a family member to recognize that mental health affects all of us. It's part of our overall health. And the more that we can talk about it, the more everybody can get their everyday support, and we don't have to wait till crises.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Scholar Scoop. I'm Steve Loflin. Every once in a while, I like to bring back a conversation from the archive that's really stuck with me. Thanks to our amazing guest, these messages are still incredibly relevant. So whether you're hearing it for the first time or revisiting it with a fresh perspective, I'm really glad you're here. And if you're new to Scholar Scoop, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. Now, let's get some Scholar Scoop. Hey, Allison, thank you so much for joining me today for some Scholar Scoop. How are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm so thrilled to be able to be with you here today, Steve. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, I think I was mentioning this when I started thinking about people that I would really love to talk to. You were right at the top of the list. So I really appreciated you saying yes to this. And there's so much that I think we can dive into. I was giving this some thought before we jumped on here. I think you said that we're at about year number 22 for Active Minds. Is that right?
I officially started the organization right after graduating college in 2003. So we are exactly at 22 years. It was December by the time we were incorporated as a nonprofit. But yeah, we're at 22 years exactly right now.
Wow. So it's probably like what, 5 or so years after you had started. I think it was maybe Kevin Kruger who introduced us and said, you two should know each other. You should meet Allison. And I remember so clearly the first time that we grabbed a drink. I think it was at Bar DuPont in Washington. And I was so energized by what you were creating and so excited about the path that was so similar to how NSCS had gotten started in terms of chapters and officers and engaging, all of these institutions. And so I've loved watching Active Minds kind of grow into being the organization that it is today. But for everyone listening into this who probably or maybe haven't even heard of Active Minds, why don't you just take a few minutes and give us a little bit of the story so that we can have that context as we talk about what it means today?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And it's funny, Steve, I think back to that time that we had drinks too, and I remember it so well. And I remember saying, oh, wow, he's done this. He has started something as a young adult, and it's successful, and it gives me hope that this can go somewhere. So I want you to know how much of um, a friend, colleague, role model you have been from the very beginning. And I so distinctly remember that first conversation. And I think Kevin made that introduction because he saw, we were two of only a handful of young adults who had started something coming out of college and launching it for other youth and young adults. So just know how meaningful this relationship has been to me, and how much I've loved both the partnership between Active Minds and NSCS, but just being able to connect with you and hear all the successes of NSCS and the work that you all are doing, and how it interlaps with us. So
I
I'm
appreciate
thrilled
that.
to, yeah, I mean, it's really been so meaningful. So yes, the short version maybe, or the longer version of my story, is that I was a freshman in college. I was at the University of Pennsylvania in March of my freshman year. My brother Brian died by suicide. He had been a college student himself who started struggling with his mental health in his freshman year, but didn't tell anybody about it until his senior year. At that point, he took a leave of absence from his school, came home. I was a senior in high school at the time. We're 4 years apart. Came home, started in really intensive treatment at home, but ended up taking his life about a year and a half later in March of my freshman year. And I can share that story now because it's been a really long time, and because I get the chance to share it a lot now, which I feel really honored by. When it happened, I was 18. I had lost my other half. Brian was my only sibling. I was struggling through figuring out who I was, what had happened, and really more than anything, this idea that how did he start struggling with his mental health in his freshman year and not tell anybody until his senior year, not feel comfortable telling anybody. And I really reflected on the fact that nobody was talking about mental health. And when you dive into research and you find out that the age of onset of most mental health issues is the high school and the college age, Brian's story was not really unique, but the fact that nobody was talking about it meant that a lot of people were struggling alone. And so I launched what was a student group that ended up becoming the first chapter of Active Minds in my undergrad. And then when I graduated in 2003, started the nonprofit in order to develop and support other chapters of that student group. And more than anything, kind of mobilize youth and young adults to change culture in mental health. I wanted to create an environment where people like Brian knew that they weren't alone, felt comfortable reaching out for help, and got the help that they needed as soon as they needed it, and didn't have to go, what for Brian was 4 years before finally reaching out for help. And for him, by the time he reached out for help, he had already lost all hope. And I really wanted to create an environment where people could get the help that they needed before they lost hope, before a crisis could occur. So that's the genesis of the organization, and where we go from one chapter in college campuses to now what we are as an organization at Active Minds, where we are on colleges and high schools and middle schools. We still have our chapter model, but we also have a number of direct to youth programs, everything from learning how to change policies in your school to bringing a speaker to your school to our suicide prevention exhibits and silence packing, all around changing social norms around mental health, and creating a lifetime of change so that people feel comfortable getting the help they need as soon as they need it.
Wow, what a incredible story. I think it's a great tribute to Brian and certainly to the legacy. And I think for you, while I know we're having this conversation right now, and it is Mental Health Awareness Month, I guess in your work, it's almost always mental health awareness. So, was there even 22 years ago when you started this, like a mental health awareness month?
It's such a good question. I think about this a lot of what's changed. The short of the answer is if there was one, I don't remember it. I happen to remember that they started introducing this idea of World Depression Screening Day in October. And there was a little bit of talk about suicide, but nothing that was a public conversation. I think that's been the biggest change, was that even if there was this month, the only people who were talking about it were the folks who were already really actively involved in their own or their loved ones' mental health struggles. It was not a public conversation. It was not a public health conversation. And that's really the evolution over these past 22 years. The amount that we're willing to talk about this now, while we still have a long way to go, but the amount that we're willing to talk about it as a general public, the fact that you're not part of a mental health organization and yet and you're honoring the fact that it's Mental Health Awareness Month is a huge change and growth for this field. So the short answer is I don't remember, which means that if there was, they weren't doing a great job, right? And that's
Right.
our goal, is to get people really talking about this every day. You don't have to have a mental health struggle. You don't have to be part of a mental health organization. You don't have to have family member, to recognize that mental health affects all of us. It's part of our overall health. And the more that we can talk about it, the more everybody can get their everyday support. And we don't have to wait till crises and all the pieces that impacted our family. So we certainly didn't commemorate it at my school. I certainly hadn't learned about mental health in health class in high school. And we didn't even say the word suicide. And we barely started saying the word depression back in the year 2000 when my brother Brian died.
Well, I feel like generationally, you're right. A lot of things have changed. I think about my parents or in some cases, people that I know. It feels like suicide is something people would whisper or not really want to address at all. And I think that was horrible for the families that must have been experiencing that people just didn't know how to react. And so fast forward to now, I do think there's so much more willingness to talk about it, to address it. But I also still think there's a lot of people struggling with it and they don't really know what to do. And when you're thinking about advice that you give to your high school or middle school or college students, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you really are trying to open the door to helping people address these things?
I think about what you said all the time and how differently my brother's friends responded to his death versus my parents and grandparents' friends and generation. It was just a generational shift, and those generations didn't know how to talk about it, so they didn't say anything. And my friends and Brian's friends responded by saying, "We don't know what to say, but we're here for you." And so that was really where that shift happened. But the fact is that people don't know what to say. We haven't been taught it because this is such a new conversation. So I think where I land is um, the best thing to do is just to say, "I'm here for you." If you have somebody who's struggling in your life, we actually have a program at Active Minds that we've partnered with MTV called Ask. And the idea is, if you don't, it's everyday conversations for everyday struggles, kind of the stop, drop, and roll of mental health. There's somebody in your life who's struggling. You don't know what to say. Ask, acknowledge, support, keep in touch. Hey, I hear you. That sounds really hard. What can we do? How can I support you? You want me to walk you over to the counseling center? Can we go out for a run? Should we call a doctor? Whatever it may be. And then the K, keep in touch. Let somebody know that you're thinking of them and you see them. Such a critical way to support each other. And I would say, if you are somebody yourself who's struggling, know that you're not alone. Know that you deserve help, and find that help wherever feels comfortable to you. That this is nobody's fault. That when you look at statistics, most people will struggle with their mental health at some point in their life. And at any given time, 1 in 4 individuals, young people, are dealing with mental health struggles right now. So you're really, really not alone. And reach out, even gingerly, to a trusted person in your life to say, "I'm not doing okay." Let them into that pain with you. Let them know that they don't need to know what to say, but just to be there with you is sometimes the best support. I think these issues are so, we're not taught what to say, and so we're afraid to say anything. There's very little that you can say that's wrong. So just support, let people know that you care about them, you love them. It's not their fault. We're not comparing uh, situations. It's not as though, well, at least you have this and I had that, or this person has this. No, everybody deserves to have the feelings that they do, and you, as somebody who's struggling, deserves to feel well and deserves to thrive, and deserves to get the help and the support that you need. And sometimes that comes from a friend, and sometimes that comes from a therapist, and sometimes that comes from calling 988, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And all of those are totally okay and appropriate. Some of us are on medication, some of us are in inpatient therapy, and some of us are going for runs. All of it is ways to take care of our mental health, and it's all perfectly okay.
Yeah, I think and I know this is what you do through Active Minds. It's like we just need to continue to tell that story to people and get them to see, that there's no shame in this, and finding someone to listen is the best place to start. I have felt like over the past handful of years that institutions are trying to embrace this in a much bigger way. And maybe especially since the pandemic, there's been a lot more emphasis on mental health support on college campuses, at least, which is the world I'm in the most. And I think what's been interesting is to see how institutions often struggle with getting faculty members to come into the fold to be a part of this discussion. Do you feel like that's getting better, where faculty members are also telling people your ask model, or telling their students, where to go, or I'm here if you need anything? Or are faculty still embedded in that, like, my job is to do research and to teach a class, and I don't want to get involved in these other pieces of the student experience? What's that seeming like to you? I'm really curious.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think in general, yes, I'm seeing the transformation and the evolution that you're talking about. And part of it is I I think faculty have been reluctant or reticent to embrace talking about mental health because they don't know. They're humans,
Mhm.
right? And if you're
Right.
never taught how to do it, it's never modeled in your family. Then how do you then know what to do as the adult in the relationship or in the situation? So I think a lot of folks, faculty included, don't want to do it because they're afraid of doing it wrong. And what we're seeing is, as this generational shift is happening, and as folks who are of what I like to call the active minds generation, who are understanding this a little bit more willing and able and comfortable talking about it, are coming into roles of like of faculty members or leadership, they're more willing to say, hey, I want you to know that your mental health matters. I'm not an expert, but I can connect you to the counseling center. That's really all that needs to happen. I think we're constantly afraid of saying the wrong thing because we think we should be able to treat, diagnose, and address a mental health issue. We're not doctors. We're not treating and diagnosing strep, for instance, but we're saying, hey, if you have a sore throat, maybe you should go talk to somebody. And so that's what we're seeing faculty members more willing to do. And Active Minds has enjoyed partnerships with a number of faculty associations in promoting this. And I think also talking about the mental health of faculty has been a really important part of this conversation because of the stress that faculty members themselves are under. So yes, I think it's changing, and it's not a blanket change or evolution. There's some people who are more willing to talk about this than others. Some are just not comfortable doing it or don't see that as their role. But in general, we are seeing more willingness, more understanding, at least more ability to say, okay, I'm seeing something or I can't help you, but here's the opportunity to connect with a counselor. And I think schools are doing a significantly better job treating mental health as a public health issue, recognizing that it's not just something that the two counselors in the counseling center are here to address, but it's something that we should be talking about across campus. And so how do faculty know how to reach out to the counselors or other members of campus if they do have students who are struggling? I think the other important piece to note, and I probably resonant to NSCS members, there are also instances like my brother Brian, who had a 3.8 GPA and was a Dean's List student, even while he was struggling with his mental health. And so I think one of the important pieces, especially for high achieving youth and young adults, is that sometimes our academics are what give us the most pride and where we feel like we can be and we are the most successful. And sometimes it can feel even harder to acknowledge that there's struggle. And sometimes it's a faculty member who's going to catch it, but oftentimes not. Oftentimes we can still mask it really well. And that doesn't mean that you don't deserve help, right? And that's the thing that I really wish for Brian, is to know that he could still be a successful person and have a mental health disorder, a mental health issue that he was dealing with and he was treating and supporting. But so oftentimes, especially for high achieving people, those things feel like they're mutually exclusive. And that's where faculty members, as good as faculty members can be, if you're masking and you're getting good grades and you're still showing up and you're still showing, whether it's your faculty or your friends, that you're doing just fine, nobody is able to pick up on some of the struggle. And so as much as we can kind of let people into our world, we are finding that faculty are more willing to support this as well as friends and family.
Well, I just remember, of all the times we would meet up, we would talk oftentimes about running the organization and all the logistics. And I remember when I had that aha moment and I was like, oh my gosh, Allison, like, you know, I'm running an organization of high achievers. And I think, if anything, high achievers tend to put so much pressure on themselves. And oftentimes they can't even tell you why they're putting so much pressure on themselves. But the pressure in turn creates a lot of challenges and issues. And so, I think our partnership has been really helpful. And it's also reminding our members or college students or anyone actually that you should also just be willing to ask your teacher or your professor for help and not expect them to super sleuth it out that you might need some help. And I think that's where this sense of it's okay to say you're not okay comes from, right? So I think the more we can do this and other organizations can get involved with supporting you, hopefully that's just a ripple effect to getting students to where they need to be. So seems like a lot of progress. So for that, I'm grateful. Thank you for everything you've been doing for sure on that front.
Really appreciate it. And I think, like I said, with our ask model, no two situations are the same, right? So it's not as though one group of people or one person has things worse than others. And high achievers have their own challenges, and even high achievers, I'm blanketing, but for somebody who is used to doing really well and is used to being at the top of their class, it can be particularly hard to say I'm not doing okay or that I'm struggling. And I reflect a lot on my brother, my own experience. And you're right, Steve. Folks aren't going to sleuth. They have a lot of things they're dealing with, and so it's
Right.
incumbent on us to say, I'm struggling, but you deserve that support. just as much as anybody else does. And you can still be successful and thrive and all of the things while you deal with your mental health struggle. And so I think I just can't underscore enough what you said. And I really appreciate that you are having this conversation within your network, and to bring mental health into the conversation of NSCS members, because this is not an issue that's isolated to high achievers, but it's also not something that folks who are used to achieving don't experience. And it's a real conversation that we need to have, and we need to recognize that we all come with our own challenges, and we all deserve that support.
Yeah, and I having heard your story and think about, starting an SCS and these types of things. Did you ever think you'd be an entrepreneur, or do you see yourself as an entrepreneur?
Oh my God, it's such a funny question. I'm so curious what your answer to that would be. The answer is no. I laugh because I graduated. For everybody who's listening, I graduated with degrees in psychology and sociology, which taught me to go to graduate school. It really led me on no path at all. I had
Right.
never taken a business class. I had never worked at a nonprofit. I didn't know what I was doing, and it was the end of my senior year when it occurred to me that this extracurricular work that I was doing, that this active minds chapter that I was leading, could become my job. Back
Yeah.
then, mental health advocacy was not a field. Literally, if you were in psychology or sociology, you went into graduate school to either go into research or clinical practice. And I knew I didn't want to go into clinical practice, and I wasn't thinking I wanted to research. And so then I just started Active Minds. I never anticipated being an entrepreneur. I do see myself as that. I mean, I would say, I see it as kind of a social entrepreneur, and so there's this forging a new path with a social issue, but also having to run a business, and having, the most important thing to me is that Active Minds can exist tomorrow, so that the work that we're doing today is still able to have impact tomorrow. So that means making sure that we have the right team members, we have the right funding coming in, we have the right mission, we're staying true to our values, so that we can be a successful organization, because I want not only the youth and young adults of 2020 or 2003 to be impacted, but also those of 2025 and beyond. And so it's just this mixture of really being having like having a cause and having a reason we're doing this work, but successfully running a business. And it's been a lot of working on the job, and something that I couldn't imagine doing anything else with my life. And so it's a really fascinating way to reflect on what life has been like, what work has been like. But I'm curious if I can ask you, like, do you see yourself as an entrepreneur, and did you predict or project entrepreneurship for yourself?
I do see myself as an entrepreneur, but I was reluctant to say that for a long time. And I think it's just because of I was a person who saw myself as a student affairs professional, and that's how I define myself. And I wanted to be a part of the student experience on a college campus. And I guess differently, but some similarities. When I saw that there was a need for something, and I saw because of my interest in first year experience, there wasn't this recognition there for these students who transitioned well. It's when it kind of triggered in me like, well, I should start something, right? And I think it's something that I try to tell people all the time. Like, if you find yourself doing something you love and you find a way to try to, or if you want to try to find a way to magnify that so that it can impact more people or do a bigger service in a bigger way, um, start it up. What's the downside? But it's funny. I remember years and years ago, I had invited Wendy Kopp, who started Teach for America, to speak at something at the University of Maryland. And so I picked her up at the train station, and we were driving out to College Park. And I just remember having this discussion, and she said to me, "Well, when did you decide you were going to be a social entrepreneur?" And I was like, I don't think I ever decided. I didn't realize I was. I didn't realize I was one. And that's probably the point that I really started to try to put it into a different perspective. Because the truth is, and I hear this all the time now, is that, most people go through life having great lives, but they never really start anything. And so the people who find a way to start something, and whether it works or maybe it doesn't work, and a lot of things don't work, which is okay too. um, I think people who are, thinking about their future or thinking about what they want to do with their lives, oftentimes you can think a little differently by saying, what can I create or what can I start? And, it's unfortunate the reason that Active Minds got started, but at the same time, the impact that it had has been tremendous. And that's just because you've fueled that to make it happen. So I think by the true definition of an entrepreneur, I think you're right there with your picture next to it in the dictionary. But I do get what you're saying on the social side. It's like not necessarily to sell this and make bazillions of dollars because it just doesn't work that way for nonprofits. That's a discussion for a whole nother time. But but I do try to encourage students, especially, to think about things that they could start or passions that they have that they could build upon. So I think that's something really to continue to mull over.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think the one thing that I've learned over the years too, and I can only speak to social entrepreneurship because I have never created that trinket that we could sell for billions of dollars. But I think on the social side, one of the really important things is to, I think the reason you spoke to this in the story, you started NSCS because it didn't exist yet. I started Active Minds because it didn't exist. And I think one of the things, one of the areas where we can do ourselves a disservice is if we start on the social side, something that does already exist. And the A, that then creates competition within the field, but B, it sets ourselves up for less success. So I would just really encourage folks who are thinking on the social side, social entrepreneurship, of what isn't out there that needs to be out there that I can start. Whereas I think on the regular entrepreneurship side, trinkets can keep being created,
Yeah.
and there's enough capital in order for your trinket to be successful and that other trinket. In the
Yep.
social entrepreneurship side and the nonprofit side, there's just less opportunity for success. And so really encouraging folks to take a look at what is around. I didn't share this part of my story, but I had reached out to all the national mental health organizations at the time when I decided I wanted to start Active Minds, to see what they had that I could just bring to my campus, and there was nothing, and nobody responded. And that's why I launched Active Minds. And as you shared, Steve, like, it's not, you didn't just start NSCS, but there were 12 other NSCSs already existing.
Right.
And I think that's a really important piece to set ourselves up for success and to actually create change, the change that we all want to see. That happens when that success is possible.
No, that's a really good way to look at it. And there's a lot of problems that exist that need a good solution for solving. So I think if you can continue to latch on and find those things and then find the solution, that's a way to build a great entrepreneur venture that makes a difference. I think in the entrepreneur category, though, I'm also curious to hear your thoughts about this. I've heard some mixed reviews lately, and I think you'll understand it, or I can frame it up from the perspective of we're talking about Kevin earlier in NASPA, which is the Student Affairs Professional Association. And I've just noticed, like, over the past 20 years, used to be, if you would go to NASPA, there'd be a lot of exhibitors and people there selling things that maybe colleges and universities would like to have for their students. And it was probably 20 years ago, Active Minds was the one table that was there related to kind of mental health for students. Um, that's really changed, and I noticed this year when I was there, I would probably venture to say there was 25 or so companies or organizations that are now providing some service or something related to mental health. Which, on one hand, gets the crux of what you just said about starting up organizations when things already exist. But on the other side of the equation, a lot of these things are, these large for-profit companies trying to solve and provide solutions for access to therapists and counselors and other things. And I feel like that, in theory, is great, that students have the ability to access therapists in all kinds of ways on campus or churches or other places. But I've also heard some challenges, like, getting ghosted by these online places. Because you're in this space, I'm just curious, like, what your take is when students or other people are thinking about, I need help, and I've heard about this online solution. Um, are those the best approach, or is it fit into the bucket of, like, wherever you need to get the help, you should get it? I'm just curious because there are a lot of them now, and I think it's a little confusing.
Yeah, it is, and it can be. And I think, the short answer is, if you need help, reach out for help wherever you can. The longer answer is I really commend colleges and universities for doing everything they can to build up their own clinical services within the school's counseling center, and then also developing relationships with some of these third parties for the instances where they can't support their students. And so my recommendation, there are a couple of places. One, I mentioned earlier, 988. 988 is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's a national hotline where you can call or text. There's also Trevor Lifeline and Crisis Text Line. Both of those are national organizations that run support services for somebody who is in crisis, or for a friend or family member of somebody who's in crisis. Those are nationally acclaimed, and I would highly recommend any of the three of them. The Trevor Lifeline is for youth and young adults who identify as LGBTQ+. Crisis Text Line and 988 are texting, of course, and then 988
Sure.
offers the phone and texting. And then also your school's counseling services, they're doing they have their Herculean work of going through these third parties to figure out what should the option be available to their student or students, and they're doing a lot of really important work identifying that. And so if you have no idea where to turn, I would turn first to their school's counseling services and then the resources they recommend. Otherwise, we are all inundated when you Google mental health support with all of those ads. And right now, there's not a good way to know what is a good one or not a good one. And
Yeah.
so I would say keep trying until you find something that works for you. Kind of like with a doctor, if you went to a doctor you didn't like or who ghosted you, you would go to a different doctor. We haven't been taught that in mental health. If you go to a therapist or counselor who you just don't jive with, it's okay to say you're not the right match with me and I want to go on to somebody else. And so whether that's going from one program to another or one therapist to another, you have every right to do that. But it's really hard to know what's good and what's not. Find out who people around you are talking to and what
Yeah.
programs they're using. That's another great way to do it. But reach out, and that's the piece that I would say first and foremost. Don't be afraid that the programs are going to ghost you. Don't be afraid that it's going to be bad, and so you shouldn't do it at all. Try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. But a great first place to start is with your school's counseling services.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I do think, like we've talked about throughout this conversation, schools are doing a much better job of being tuned into this and wanting to be helpful. And you just need to take the initiative to ask for the help. And so I think that's just something we can continue to talk about. I know that you're swamped, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do think it would be great if you could talk just for a minute about your backpack project. And I'm not sure if you're still doing the tour of that, but I think that that is such a meaningful and such a visual to your work. And so, can you just talk a little bit about how that idea came together and actually what it is and how it works?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So this is one of those what I call kind of direct to youth and young adults programs that you don't need a chapter. This is our program called Send Silence Packing, which is a display of backpacks that represent the youth and young adults who die by suicide each year. And the backpacks have stories on them of individuals who have died by suicide or stories of hope. And we travel Send Silence Packing to different college campuses and public spaces throughout the course of the year. We're on a tour right now. We'll be on a tour again later next semester, visiting schools across the country and state house lawns and stadiums, football stadiums, you name it. And the idea is suicide is preventable. We all have a role to play to support each other, and there's so many reasons to have hope. And so, embedded throughout the Send Silence Packing interactive exhibit is a hope wall. It's a multimedia, listen to people's stories, walk around, look at the backpacks, read the stories. It is the main and really only program that we have at Active Minds focused specifically on suicide prevention. Yeah, being a suicide loss survivor, that's obviously a particularly important topic for me. But I think one of the really important things that we talk about in suicide prevention is that it starts all the way upstream to mental health promotion and getting support. My brother, I believe really strongly, suicide would not have been part of his story had he gotten support earlier. And so all of these pieces are critical as suicide prevention agents. But Send Silence Packing is a program that started, I want to say, Steve, probably 15, almost 20 years ago. It's one of our earliest programs. And I remember sitting in our office. We were in the NASPA offices at the time. We were subletting one little office within the NASPA space, myself and my two employees at the time. And we were talking about and said, like, what can be our big public display of what we do. We're starting to create chapters on campuses, and we have youth and young adults who are mobilized and want to talk about mental health differently. How do we get the general public to understand both the importance of the work that we're doing and how they can get involved in this work? And that's where we ideated on what has become Send Silence Packing, and did our very first display on the National Mall in I think 2008 or so, and have been traveling it across the country ever since. Now we have hit up hundreds of campuses and public spaces and all of those pieces, and we're not stopping. We're continuing to build on and grow the impact of Send Silence Packing, and to bring it to more and more communities.
I think it's amazing, and I hope anyone that's hearing this, I hope that they find an opportunity to see this, because it's such a visual for the impact that suicide has on people. And thank you, Allison, for what you have built and created, and the many, many, many lives that you have changed and supported. So I know you've made a huge difference, and I know you will continue to make a huge difference. And I'm so glad to have the opportunity to know you and to have watched this journey unfold. So congratulations, and thank you for that.
Thank you, and likewise. And again, we are always looking at NSCS and members and the work that you do, and you've been such an incredible role model for me, and proof that it can work and it can happen, and there's no stopping, right? There's so much more to be done, and so many more. This generation is just so cool. So what can we do? What kind of support can we give, and what can we get out of it? So I'm just really happy to have this conversation, Steve, and always appreciate the friendship and connection between NSCS and Active Minds.
Thank you so much for all of this scholar scoop. Thanks so much for listening. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about, or maybe reminded you of something you needed to hear right now. If this episode resonated with you, I'd encourage you to share it with someone who might benefit from it as well. Those connections really matter. As always, thanks for being a part of this community. I'll see you back here for more Scholar Scoop real soon.